Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Low Carb Hustle. I'm very excited today. Get to jump in with my buddy Martin. Martin, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm awesome, really. And thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Martin, for those of you who are not necessarily familiar with you, can you share a little bit about your life story, your background that brought you to the point where you're doing a lot of this metabolic typing, helping people go from sick to healthy, and healthy people going from healthy to extremely healthy?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I got into it innocently. I grew up thinking that the science was science and that doctors had my best interest in their mind and all of that, fully indoctrinated into the white coat and diploma syndrome. And at 25, I had a freshly earned full medical coverage, full dental coverage. I walked into a dentist's office and I thought, well, he's going to just do the right thing for me. Ended up that he did the right thing for him. I ended up with 12 mercury amalgam fillings. And with my genetics, I'm not a great detoxifier. I ended up just destroying my health because 12 mercury amalgam fillings caused a massive problem. So I started with carpal tunnel, plantar fasciitis, back going to hell, periodontal disease, allergies, and weight gain, all at the hands of the body becoming sick with mercury toxicity. So it started when I was 25, and then by the time I was 35, I finally clued in that having seen an orthopedic surgeon, chiropractor, naturopath, and then every sort of a weirder things I've done, many, many different techniques, I realized that I'm going to have to go back to my original training, which is computer science and business administration. And it was this analyze this. And the analysis was these people never look for root cause. They never ask, what is the cause of this? So while I was being treated for back pain and problems lifting weights and whatever, those were chasing symptoms, never asking, but what did it? Why is that? Why am I not healthy? And so finally, at about 35, I dove into books. This was 1984, 5. So no internet, just libraries. So I read a lot, studied a lot, figured it out. It was the industrial toxicity driven by mercury and by my genetics. And then I had
Wow.
to unpack, undo, reverse. And so by the time I was 45, I had it all figured out. I was back on the horse, but I've lost 20 years of really tough life.
Yeah, you had it take you 20 years to reverse the damage that you did when you were 25.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I want to talk a little bit about how you were able to reverse the damage from the mercury toxicity. I want to talk about the metabolic typing and how you knew you're not a good detoxifier. But I want to hone in real quickly on what you said about people, like especially in the medical industry, not looking for root causes. And
Yeah.
I know a lot of people chalk this up to basically being like medical school is oftentimes subsidized or paid for by pharmaceutical companies or people without the interest of finding the root cause because it makes more financial sense to sell us a band-aid and something that we can be taking for the rest of our lives. What do you think about that?
Well, you pretty much answered your question with your question, which is exactly Carnegie and Rockefeller got together back in early 1900s, hired a guy called, that's not coming to me now. Um, Fishbein, I think it was the name. Anyway, they wrote a report. They figured out what they needed to do in order to promote patented pharmaceutical medicine. Back when we had homeopathy, naturopathy, what else did we have? Herbology, all of that stuff. And there were multiple colleges teaching multiple methods in the 1920s. By the time 1940 rolled in, they had consolidated everything. They had put all colleges other than the pharmaceutical method out of business. And they did that creatively by creating foundations. So this was This was all under the guise of donating money, giving away money. This was financed through foundations. They financed colleges, and the colleges financed the research as well. So all of a sudden, we got this narrowing of perspective all the way down to nothing other than patented pharmaceutical, petrochemical, medicals. That's what we've got. So we're chasing not the healing of a person, we're chasing the treatment of the person. So the classic line is heal the patient, lose a customer.
That is funny and also very sad when you say it out like that.
Well, it's money driven.
Yeah. And so I don't think that, I don't necessarily think that on this podcast or, maybe in our lifetimes, we will see a shift away from that pharmaceutical driven model back towards homeopathy or just different alternatives. So it feels like the onus is on us as the consumer, as the individual, to really figure out our own health issues, dial in, do the right testing, and make the correct judgment calls for us without necessarily buying in 100% to what this person or that person said.
Right. I think the system is now so well entrenched that the only way there's going to be a change is if something completely new grows organically in parallel to it and people just naturally switch. And I see it as every day we all vote with our wallets. The dollars that we spend are like oxygen in the economy. So whatever I spend money on, we're going to get more of. And these people are magically clever. They have divorced the consumer from the payment. It's called health insurance. You never see the bill, so you never care what it cost. You never care if it's efficient or intelligent or whatever. You just say, well, okay, doctor, you're telling me I need to do this. I'll do this. Is it covered? Boom.
Gotcha.
And that's what got me. That's what got me into my trouble, because I had my fresh health insurance, dental coverage, all of it. I walked in and I said, well, tell me what I need.
I saw something funny the other day that said basically a patient walked into a doctor's office, says he's presenting with these symptoms. The doctor says, hang on a second, let me go see what diseases are covered by your insurance. And I thought that was funny, but terrifying.
That is, yes, exactly. That is what's broken here. And so anyway, talking to, so I had full coverage, but everything that I had to do to get myself well was not covered. That was out of pocket.
Mm-hmm. So you did a lot of research. You went to the library, you're going through the Dewey Decimal System, you're pulling out books and doing this research.
Yeah.
And kind of surprising a little bit that there was so much research available that you were able to not only like diagnose yourself and figure out the mercury toxicity, but also figure out a way around it. That must have taken you countless hours.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I would say that I have an equivalent of a degree in hours, as far as, I know as much as any naturopath would.
Wow. So can you walk me through that process of, so you've done this research and now you got to begin that slow climb back out of that mercury toxicity.
Right.
How did that go for you?
Well, so there are two methods out there available. One's EDTA, which is a chemical chelation, and the other one's zeolite, which is an electrophysical binding. Zeolite is different because it only traps highly electropositive things, and all of the industrial toxins that we want out of the body, which would be lead, mercury, cadmium, uranium,
all the heavy metals.
Also arsenic, and also the chemicals, the forever chemicals like PFOA, PFOS, that's the Teflon and his cousins, and the fire retardant stuff and the formaldehyde stuff. All of that will get bound by this electronegative material that holds within it the electropositive stuff. It's sort of like a sponge. It pulls it in and holds it and takes it out of the body. So That's what I landed on. Got lucky, really, right? I mean, when you work at something 12 hours a day, it's amazing how lucky you get.
Yeah, true.
So anyway, I did get lucky. I found it. I didn't have to do the EDTA, which of course means 1.5 hours of an IV drip in a doctor's office once a month, 12 times, that sort of thing. That's the slow, expensive way. That's like I don't know, $3,000-4,000 now.
Okay.
Whereas zeolite is like $300-400 for the
Okay.
same result. So I did the zeolite, and I found a chiropractor who developed a product. It's an amino acid blend, and the amino acids is what gets so the process is mercury in my body breaks down the mucosal barriers, breaks down my gut. So I now have leaky gut, and I have my bad microbiome, and I need to repair all of that. And so the amino acid is a compensation for the broken gut. So you need to fix the gut, detox the body, repair the gut, bring it all back together so that you're starting to now make less damage and more repair.
And we're in a really toxic environment. I think everything is basically trying to kill us. It seems like at this point, and I think it's a little bit depressing if you stare too long at it. But
Yeah.
for people who are interested in this or trying to figure out like, hey, is this me? I've been dealing with these symptoms. I haven't been able to lose the weight. I just have like my mood swings. I just don't have all these negative pieces in place. What's the first step for someone like that
Mm,
to start determining, do you
yeah.
have toxicity poisoning? Do you have heavy metals? Like, where do you go
Yeah.
next?
Well, pretty much need to assume that you now do, because you're living in an environment that is toxic with every year, right? Like I was born in the 50s. So I grew up in a world that was way less toxic, because with every ton of glyphosate, with every ton of plastics, with every ton of whatever that the industry is putting out, it's not getting lost. It's just being put on the planet. It's just rising tide. Think of an aquarium. If I were a fish in the aquarium, I'm taking food from it, I'm pooping in it. Everything's happening in the terrain, right? So I'm interacting with it. So as the industry keeps dumping in the new things into the aquarium, the water is slowly getting more and more toxic. So people who are in their 20s now are living in a world that's, I don't know what the number is, X times more toxic than the one I was in when I was 20.
I mean, like
So
we just
that's
saw a study came out that showed that you can't find a male who does not have microplastics in his testicles. You just like that.
right.
This study could
Yeah,
not
like
find
that.
someone. Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. And so the other part is, um, well, you have to assume, right, that you are living in a toxic world. You're sitting in your car as you're driving. The brake pads that are being worn are made of metal. So metal particles of the brake pads wearing are in the air. You're inhaling that. You're inhaling the rubber dust from the tires. You're inhaling the fire, coal burning power plant exhaust that's coming to you with sulfurs and heavy metals like mercury and whatnot. Like that's all coming into the world. So you assume that you are toxic. You may as well, because you are. So that's
Okay.
one. Two. Now the metabolic typing questions that you threw in. This was uh, research.
Can you define metabolic typing real quick?
Yeah, I will do that. Research done, culminating in 1987. Bill Walcott figured it out, and there were other researchers before him, like William Kelly and other guys, that were understanding that we had either an oxidative system. They are called oxidizers. You can be a slow oxidizer or a fast oxidizer. And if you have a dominance in the oxidative system, you process foods in a certain way. And then there's the other one's called autonomic, and you have dominance in one or the other, sort of like left-handed or right-handed. You are going to be either oxidizer dominant or autonomic dominant. And here's what happens: there are macronutrients. These are carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. These are used for energy generation. All that other stuff, that's secondary. All the minerals and vitamins and polyphenols and all of that, that's good, that's structural. But Carbs, fats, and proteins are energetic. So the structural, you can go slower because you can have a deficit for a month or two or three. But if you have a food deficit for a month, you're skeletal, and if you overdo it, you're going to perish. Right.
Okay.
So those macronutrients, the ratios in which we use them, are reflected in how we react to it.
And that goes back to the autonomic versus oxidative
Yeah,
type.
and I'll get to that in just a sec. So there's a famous guy, Weston O. Price, dentist, who traveled in the 1930s and wrote up what was this. Wherever he went, and he went to 12 different places on the planet, he determined that as long as the person ate the aboriginal diet, they did fine. As soon as they switched to the industrial diet, they didn't. They had degenerative changes and they had health problems and so on. So the one is eat foods that are grown the old school way.
And locally, it sounds like.
Well, and so now an example. Yeah, 500 years ago, no industrial revolution, just old school living. A boy is born in Switzerland. He is now living in an alpine valley. The food resource there is aged cheese, sauerkraut, some vegetables. On Sunday, they kill the chicken, and in February, they'll kill the pig. That's the Swiss thing, right?
Okay.
Different example. A child born in a Bedouin family in North Africa. Dates, figs, pomegranates, camel milk. The camel is rare. They don't kill it very often. They don't eat much meat. It's mostly carbs, right? A child born in Maasai tribe, they drink blood from cows and eat mostly fat. That's it. So now what happens is when the child is born into that terrain, into that society, if his genetics match, then he thrives and he survives and he lives. But if he's mismatched, he's going to be weaker, and next infection that runs through the village is probably going to slay him. So it was common back when for a woman to give birth to a dozen, but only see 3 or 4 to grow up to adulthood and reproduction. So it didn't take many generations for people to adapt. So visualize, for example, the North American Plains Indian. He only knows buffalo as his food resource. He follows the buffalo. He eats bear fat and berries called pemmican. That's his food storage, but he doesn't have carbs to speak of. He eats beef. Well, buffalo. Something happened in my screen here.
You're good. You're still good.
Just
You
a
just,
flip.
I can still hear you, so no problem.
Okay. So when the Europeans showed up on the plains in North America with their wheat and whiskey, there was no genetic predisposition in those people to handle it. Their metabolic stuff was just blown out. Couldn't cope.
So it sounds like you're saying that the macronutrient ratios are not as important as the genetic predisposition to be able to handle those macronutrients.
Well, what I'm saying is that there is variance, right? Like the further away from the equator you are, the shorter the growing season and the more dependent you'll be on animal food. Like a Norwegian is going to eat dried cod and salmon and reindeer for 9 months of the year, and then there's a 3-month long growing season that lets him grow some cabbage, and he'll make sauerkraut and keep that year round.
Okay.
But there's not a lot of plant food. Whereas when you are in Malaysia or India or someplace like that, it's easier to find fruit and stuff all year round. So it's kind of easier to be a vegetarian yogi when your genetics are tropical than if your genetics are Northern European, which so many of us are. Right? Mm-hmm. And then the environment. So we have the coastals, which were British Isles. They were mainly living either on fishing or shepherds, sheep tending, whatnot. France, Germany, all that. Those were mostly coastals. They were living off of fish. So I see three main environments. Either you're living on the coast and you eat a lot of fish and vegetables that you grow on soils that are not great, or you're a deep country hunter, or you may be a farmer. Like there was, for example, the fertile valley in North Italy where the Roman Empire got its stuff going. They grew a lot of wheat, but it was a fairly narrow population. It was specific to them.
Okay. So how to bring us back to the oxidative versus autonomic.
Autonomic. Okay, so left hand, right hand. The oxidizer is alkalized by eating fats and acidified by eating carbs.
And just in this context, we want to be more alkaline. More acidic means more inflammation.
Now, let me explain that in the next sentence.
Okay.
So the autonomic is flipped. So he's acidified by fats and alkalized by carbs. Here's what happens. When you're in the middle, balanced, just right, you need to be slightly alkaline, which is 7.35 on the scale. 7.0 is neutral. Higher numbers go into alkalinity. But here's what happens. If you over-alkalize a person past the middle point, first you start noticing procrastination, then despondence, undermotivation, and then in deep, far-out depression. Just pull the blanket over his head. I'm not getting up today. Just unmotivated.
Okay.
So these people are friendlier, jovial, kind, nice, artsy, fun to get with, but they tend to be depressive and don't get a lot of stuff done.
Especially in that alkaline state.
When you're over-alkalized, you just don't feel like doing anything. Now, drifting into acidity, first thing that happens is you get up early and you're highly motivated and twitch, let's get it done. And you start losing your social graces. First, you'll be interrupting others, and then you'll be yelling at them, pushing them, like, move faster, come on. And if you get really acidic, then road rage is your standard modality.
Okay.
Now, if it's externally expressed, it's mainly raging at others. When it's internally expressed, you deal with anxiety. You're now either reliving your past and beating yourself up for it, or you're speculating about the future, painting dark pictures of how bad things are going to turn out. Right?
Gotcha.
Anxiety.
I got to check in on some of this acidity. There's too much road rage in my last couple weeks.
So if you want to get stuff done, you want to be somewhat acidic because you'll be highly motivated and energized and just doing it. And what's interesting is that's where the autonomic nervous system has its two branches, sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic associated with fight or flight, whereas parasympathetic is the rest, repair, digest. And you can't be in both. It's like a seesaw. You're either there or there. And so when you're in the stressed getting stuff done, you're not digesting. And you're not repairing, you are functioning, right? So that's okay, right? Like you want to get stuff done, you want to run away from danger or defeat the enemy or whatever it is that you need to do. But you need to repair. You can't sleep when you're in drive, right?
Right. 100%. So,
go on.
So like we're basically bringing this back to if you're eating for your right type, you are going to be able to manipulate the alkalinity or the acidity in your body to meet the needs that you have. So First of all, understanding what your metabolic type is, so you basically understanding the rules of your body. So you can either decide to follow the rules or break the rules on occasion.
Right. Oh, totally. Well, you go to a party and you watch people consume alcohol. The autonomics are going to become more alkaline, so they start getting emotional, oversharing, telling too much, and then crying about things, and then they go to sleep.
Oh, I know that guy. Yeah.
And then the oxidizer, they will get more agitated, talk louder, then start picking fights. First verbal, and then if they keep pushing it, they'll just punch each other.
Okay.
They're just nasty people.
The oxidizers on alcohol are nasty people.
Yes. And so here's what we have. When you are okay, so there are these four types. So you have a slow oxidizer, fast oxidizer, or the sympathetic or parasympathetic dominant. It's like four corners of a room. And you would like to be in the middle with most of your choices. So if you're in the parasympathetic corner, you're waking up unmotivated late, and you need to eat high fat, high protein foods to bring yourself to activity. If you give yourself more carbs to start your day, you're going to just get depressed and get nothing done.
That makes sense. I feel like I see a lot of people in that state.
Yeah. And so you need to understand, if you're over alkaline already, if you're an autonomic, you need high fat, high protein. But if you're a slow oxidizer, who's the other one that wakes up like that, they actually get worse by fats. You need to push carbs. So they need to actually have a fruit salad for breakfast.
Oh, very interesting. So how can we tell it where we are on that scale? What's the test to
Well, you
figure
can
out?
test it. We have an online quiz that you can take. That's a $97 treat, and we'll hand you the answers quickly. Or you do your own testing. So you do a carb challenge. You eat a bowl of porridge with a banana on top and watch. If you become agitated from that, you're an oxidizer. If you
Okay.
become depressed from it, you are an autonomic.
I feel like I see a lot of times people eat the carbohydrates for breakfast or for lunch, and they kind of, I don't necessarily know if they get depressed, but they get tired. They get hungry again soon. Are
Yeah,
those similar? Are
yeah,
those similar things
yeah.
to watch out for?
They're totally eating against their type. Yeah.
Okay.
And so then you do the opposite challenge, right? Like you can just take a big spoonful of coconut oil and just eat it right off the spoon. There's your fat hit. Is that going to alkalize you, which means it's going to make you calmer or sleepier or downright unmotivated? Or is it going to make you nervous, agitated, just, wanting to do stuff and unable to settle, unable to relax? So, so now you have a confirmation, right? Like you do the carb challenge and you do the fat challenge, and now you understand. And you're either one or the other. So you need to understand that not everybody gets alkalized by carbs. There's a lot of stories that tell you, drink carrot juice, it'll be healthy for you. Well, that works for the autonomic dominance. It does not work for the oxidizer. The fast oxidizer will get so agitated, he'll punch you for it.
About how many days do you need to do the carb with the fat challenge to determine your
Oh,
type?
it's one time. 20 minutes later, you know.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
you know the answer within an hour.
I love a self test. I love like that kind of like the N1 research is my favorite.
Yeah, that's it.
And
Excellent.
do people change types over time, or is what you are what you are?
There are variables. We have seen women in, depending on their cycle, pre-ovulation, post-ovulation, could be flipping. And we have seen some people who are intraday, that they could be a vegetarian in the morning and meat eater in the evening, or the other way around.
That's
But
interesting.
they're quite rare.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we do
So here's what we want, right?
okay.
Like what we want to teach. There's a second part to this, and the second part is the endocrine dominance to the body. And the endocrine dominance, there are four types. In the men, there is only pituitary, adrenal, and thyroid. Women also have the gonadal dominant. And the thyroid type gets skinny on fat and gains weight on carbs. Like you look like the thyroid type. I'm definitely that. The thyroid type has slim limbs, slim wrists, slim ankles. The adrenal type is built like a linebacker. His calf is the size of my thigh, kind of thing, right? And then the pituitary is more like the nerdy type, the Cabbage Patch doll or the doughboy. larger
Okay.
head, legs usually in X shape rather than not. But they are less common, but still around. So anyway, so the
It sounds
adrenal
almost like
type,
you're describing like ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph as well.
pretty close, pretty close. Yes, those are the words. Yeah.
Okay.
One will have deep chest, big, and gain weight all over the body. The other one will be sort of more the apple shape, gain weight on the belly. And then the pituitary, that's even fat distribution from ankle all the way up to the chin,
Okay.
like blubbery. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So anyway, there's the how you lose weight, how you gain weight, and that's important. So for example, the adrenal type will gain weight with fat and lose weight on starchy things. Completely
Okay.
the opposite of the thyroid, right? So the thyroid type gets skinny on a keto diet, but the adrenal does not. The adrenal gains weight on it.
Okay. So the adrenal, again, we're going back to that. That's more the linebacker type. That's what I would consider like a mesomorph, someone who can gain muscle really easily.
Yes, a very easy muscle
Okay.
gain. Yeah.
Ectomorph would be more of that thyroid type. That's this like someone who's skinny, hard gainer, has a skinny fat, has a hard time putting on muscle. And then the pituitary type would be more of like the endomorph, someone who just carries their weight in their belly, generally has a harder time gaining muscle and losing fat. About right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Cool. So that's good because I feel like a lot of people can put themselves into those categories. So just knowing that
Yeah.
can help inform the food choices or make it easier to go back and do that the carb test or
Yeah.
the fat test you were describing
Yeah,
earlier.
or you do a practical empirical, right? Uh, if you start gaining weight eating a certain style, you need to think in terms of fats and carbs. Now, the the third one, the pituitary, they're usually seduced by creamy and fluffy things like whipping cream, ice cream, and bakey things. And their health food is actually tongue, liver, heart, the hard inner organs, right? Which
Got
are
it.
also very friendly, mostly with the adrenals, but not so friendly with the thyroid.
Interesting. Why is that? Because I feel like those are going to be high in the mineral, kind of the structural stuff you were describing earlier.
They are. Many of the thyroid types don't do well with purine. Purine is the stuff found in these organ meats and in red meat. So duck and goose and beef and sardine and salmon. Those are higher in purine. And in vegetables, it would be asparagus and cauliflower. And they, if the thyroid type overdoes this, they may end up with gout.
Okay. I've had gout before. I thought it was from having like 30 grams of creatine a day, which is an experiment I did on myself. But that could be from the excessive amounts of red meat as well.
Yeah,
So
excessive purine.
so you determine this about yourself, and you use some of the principles that you're describing here to heal yourself, or is this was this farther down the line when you
Well,
were healing from mercury
I
toxicity?
I got lucky. I found the research of these smart people, and I trained under Bill Walcott as a metabolic typing advisor. So I now have a diploma that tells the world that I have actually passed the test and stuff like that, right?
Okay. So like
So,
as you're going through this process, at what point were you learning this? Like when you were doing your mercury toxicity like detoxification?
well, my detox years were the 1990s, and I started the health coach business in 2002, and I only became metabolic typing advisor in 2012.
Okay.
So it took me time, like it's like the story of the six blind men around the elephant. You this is like a tree trunk. No,
Yeah.
no, this is like a wall. And well, so there's a whole lot of people out there like that trying to feel their way through both, well, the food and the health symptoms, and why is this, right? Like once you step out of chasing symptoms and start asking about causes, you're now trying to figure out what is this. And the thing is an elephant, and if you're blind, you're going to have a lot of answers until somehow you get lucky and get the six guys talking to one another and saying, we're talking about the same thing, it just has different aspects.
Okay. So you've given us a lot of information and you've broken down a lot of like the different types from a genetic standpoint, from a like a nervous system standpoint. We talked about one of the first steps is kind of determining your genetic type. Where do people go from here?
Well, there are these 4 points that I would always highlight in my coaching, which is deal with toxicity, deal with malnutrition, deal with stagnation, and deal with trauma.
In that order?
No, all of it. That's the 4 parts of the elephant.
Okay.
Toxicity, get rid of everything that's blocking normal function. Malnutrition, bring in nutrients that you require that you're not getting. Right now, food is bad, nutritionally deficient. We have lots of calories, but not enough nutrients. You need to be eating concentrated, high nutrient value food. So that's malnutrition. 3, stagnation. If you're not moving, your lymph is stagnating. Sedentary lifestyle is a bad idea. You need movement. Exercise. Rebounders are awesome if you want speed, but doing weights, you need to move things, right?
Mm-hmm. And the
And
last
then
one
you need to stress your body. Stressing your body is required.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For thyroid type, the intermittent exercise is the best, right?
Intermittent, like fairly infrequently?
Well, like 15 minutes of full load, right? Like you do 10 reps with the heaviest weight you can manage, right? Like you want to hit the wall fairly quickly. You don't want to be running forever, just pedaling on a light load. You want to be pedaling up a really hard hill until you fall off the bike in 1 or 2 minutes. And then you breathe it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you just recover, restore, and do it again.
Yeah.
Right? Intermittent training.
I do like that. I like that pressure, kind of like pushing yourself all the way to the limit.
The time under load is important.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
The adrenal types are way better at working for 8 hours, heavy load, right? Like they can pull a wagon all day long and don't complain. The thyroid type cannot. Thyroid is a sprinter, not a hauler.
Got it. Okay.
Right.
So talk to me just like about that first pillar of toxicity. You said, assume you're toxic. We live in a toxic environment. It's in the air, it's in our water, it's in the food around us. Where can we go to either find out more resources on how to eliminate our specific type of toxicity, or is there a general protocol that you believe everyone should be doing to eliminate some of
those
the
are
environmental
such wise
toxins?
words. Those are such wise words, It's like this. You can spend a gigantic amount of money on testing, but I promise you can assume that you're toxic and save yourself the trouble. Like, for example, I can do a $300 test to evaluate your heavy metals. Then I'll give you $300 worth of zeolite. And then I'll give you another $300 test at the end of it to prove to you that you have detoxified. Or you just do the middle, do the $300 worth of zeolite, and you will feel better because you will have detoxified. And that's based on the fact that we've done it now hundreds of times.
Got it. How long, like zeolite is ZEOLITE, if anyone's curious. I know I see there's a lot of like powders, and there's also a lot of like tinctures, drops and stuff that you can be doing.
Yep.
How long do you think a good protocol is to, if you're just, hey, like I feel like I got some toxicity, some heavy metal stuff. How long should we jump into something like that? And I know you also have some available on your website. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. The Life Enthusiast website has all of this. All of my 40 years of experience is curated and reflected in that business. And so the zeolite, well, if you want convenience, you go liquid. If you want more bang for your money, you go with capsules. And if you're really hardcore, you go just plain powder.
Cool.
And so myself, convenience, I did capsules, and I did 4 capsules a day in the intense phase, which lasted 6 months for me. And then I slowed it down to 2 capsules a day. And to this day, I still take 1 capsule every morning because I get in traffic. I'm in brake pads. I'm in everywhere, like there's toxicity around me all the time.
So you just kind of have that going as an insurance policy.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Man, this has been incredibly insightful and I think really, really helpful for a lot of us who maybe have been struggling with weight gain or mood swings or just not necessarily knowing what's going on with our body when we feel certain ways. So Yeah, I'd highly encourage you guys to go check out Martin's website. It's life-enthusiast.com. He's got a lot of information on there. I think you're up to like 490 podcast episodes as well. So if you got more questions on that, you can track that down there. But Martin, thank you again for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Anything you want to leave us with before we go today?
Okay. The biggest wisdom of my life is everyone is voting with their wallets. Make sure you spend your money wisely. Whatever you want to see grow, buy more of that. And if you're spending your money on convenient but stupid, stop it. Buy
Wise
organic.
words. Wise words. You said buy organic?
Buy organic.
You feel like that's a good use of money? I've heard it both ways.
Well, it's going to get cheaper if more of us are going to go there.
But do you think organic is really as like there's a significant difference between organic and non-organic produce?
Some are worse than others. You know, a strawberry is loaded with awful stuff, as is bell pepper and grape. So those you should buy organic for sure. Cucumber and tomato is grown in a greenhouse. They probably don't pesticide it. So,
okay.
Be
So
wise.
pick wisely. Okay. Martin, thank you so much for this. It was a lot of fun. Glad I got to learn from you today.
I loved it. You're such a nice conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Talk to you soon.